Since the author of JJK, GEGE AKUTAMI, has confirmed that the series is ending this year, I do feel like we're going to see Yuta's power up and maybe Honored One moment come very, very soon. And there is a lot of evidence too, to not only suggest him just being super powerful, but to also end this series off as being one of the strongest characters we may ever see in the series. And I'll be discussing that today. But hey, if you aren't subscribing and like Jujutsu Kaisen content, or JJK in general, I would recommend subscribing. Got a ton of JJK content on the channel, so if you do, it's much appreciated. Thank you. And leaving a like does help out too. And lastly, thank you to all the Honored One and Special Crew members of the channel. The Worst Box, Kaisen, and that guy Trey. Thank you all very, very much. Okay, now there are a lot of possible power-ups Yuta can get that will just honestly ascend him so far and above most of the characters in the series by a long shot. Before I actually get into all those possible power-ups and why he will actually get the power-ups, we actually need to discuss two things first. One, does he actually need a power? And two, where does he actually scale currently compared to some of the high tiers right now? With him, of course, being a high tier. Now, to answer the first question, I guess it would actually depend on who you think his final opponent is going to be. I think even if his opponent is Kenjaku, I do think he should at least get some sort of a power, because obviously Kenjaku is stronger than him, but it can be actually debated if Yuta may have some lethal or deadly curse tools and curse techniques he actually wasn't using before. And this is something I've actually been preaching, I actually think, for half a year now, which again isn't confirmed that he was actually hiding these, it's just actually what I believe, so it may or may not be true, but at the very least I think for the most part, just from what we saw of Sendai, just looking at what we've actually seen so far, to know what he may have, yeah, he doesn't really, I don't want to say he doesn't stand a chance, I think it's actually pretty close, but he's definitely not being Kenjaku anytime soon. It is possible during the fight he actually might get a power, but honestly for Kenjaku he doesn't really need it, because he could easily team up with Yuji or Maki or someone to 2v on Kenjaku and it can end like that. I actually think the reason he needs it is because Yuta right now doesn't even scale to characters like 15-fingered Sukuna. If 15-fingered Sukuna were to rock up on Yuta and he's using Shrine, obviously keeping dismantle, the flames, and the 10 shadows, even at 15 fingers he would destroy Yuta. Not even including the fact that he actually outscales him in terms of speed and physical stats dozens of times over. Like, it's disgusting how badly 15-fingered Sukuna, unfortunately alone, actually outscales Yuta, which I was actually always of the belief that Yuta would scale pretty relative to 15-fingered Sukuna, but I actually ended up being wrong with that. From what we've seen of 15-fingered Sukuna, like, oh god, it's crazy. My man's actually a beast. So I guess at least in terms of that aspect, that's why I think he should get a power. But I will say, I've seen some people say that he doesn't need a power. The reason being, he's not the MC anymore, so he doesn't need all his shine and focus to get a power. Like, people actually say we're focusing too much on Yuta. And I do understand where people are coming from. I get those points, but I kind of see it like, let's say Maki. Maki is kind of part of the main cast, right? Obviously she's not as important as Yuji, who's the actual MC. She is part of that main clique and she's gotten so many power-ups again and again, needing so many focuses. I don't look at Yuta in the same way that I see him as Yuji, so not in the way of an MC, but I see him as part of that very core main cast of characters. So just like Maki, and in the same way Maki's just gotten power-ups again and again, I don't see why Yuta wouldn't also get a power-up if he's done it for Maki twice. And I've seen people say that Yuta doesn't need to end the series as the strongest, he doesn't need to actually be the honored one, and I actually agree with that. I think even if he does have the potential to reach Gojo and Sukuna's level, at the very least by the end of the series we won't be seeing that. He would need to train at least a decade more on top of many of the power-ups to actually reach that point. So of course I'm not saying he's going to be as strong as 20-fingered Sukuna and Gojo, please don't get me wrong, but what I am saying is he will at least get a lot stronger than he is right now and potentially even rival 15-fingered Sukuna, maybe even being as strong, who knows, we'll see actually. And in terms of where he scales, obviously you know from my recent videos I scale characters like Yorozu and Angel, though Angel is very contentious, I can't confirm that. There's only one attack we've seen of Angel with no other feats of her whatsoever, but at the very least I have Yorozu washing Yuta pretty badly. And before you get triggered, that's just my opinion, I do know a lot of you disagree with me, which is totally fine. And I do want to say now, like, again, you can disagree with this entire video, that's completely fine, let me know in the comments. Just please don't get so toxic about it, where people just start insulting me and getting hyper aggressive and spamming hateful comments. Just want to clarify, it's not that deep, you can disagree with me, it's okay guys. Okay, but back to the video. There are two extreme takes, so you have one extreme side is what I'm saying, which I say Yorozu washes, and there's another extreme side where people say Yuta would actually high diff beat her. But what I've seen is actually right in the middle, so this is what the general fan base is saying, is that Yorozu would beat Yuta, but it would probably be a mid to high diff. I've seen most people say mid diff, so these are the more reasonable and more nuanced takes who aren't going either of the extremes like me and let's say the Yuta superfans who do that, which I guess is actually understandable. And again, I do explain in my most recent video, personally I would much prefer if Yorozu versus Yuta is close, especially since it really does break the power scaling system if she's that much stronger than Yuta. But again, as always, I'm just going off pure feats. I try to take out what I want to be the truth and I just try to look at what's actually happened in the series, which I know is very hard for a lot of people, and I do really understand because a lot of the times what we want to see often becomes our actual perception of how things are. And I mean, hey, maybe that's the case with me. I will admit I really like Yorozu. Okay, but enough about that. Let's say we're just going with the middle ground take that I think the majority of people have said and agree with, is that Yorozu probably outscales Yuta, not too much, but she would probably mid diff him, maybe high diff him, but it's not extreme. Well, this isn't good because Yorozu is someone who I do think scales to 15-fingered Sukuna, but she she is someone who would get low diffed by 15-fingered Sukuna. And by the way, that is just an incredible feat of its own, considering the fact that Sukuna, with just one technique, the cleave and dismantle, again, not the flames, not the 10 shadows, and obviously him outspeeding Ryu, again, not a cleave feat. This is not a cleave feat, it's just his physical stats are so much faster that he physically moved behind Ryu before Ryu could even process or realize that Sukuna's moved. Like, his brain hadn't realized Sukuna's gone, and Sukuna, before activating cleave, had physically moved behind it. And again, this is Ryu who scales to Yuta, and most impressively of all, to Rika. Won't be getting into that now. I explained that in extreme depth in my How Strong is 15-Fingered Sukuna video, so if you want to talk about the Ryu feats, or if you disagree with the Ryu feats, please watch that video, or at least comment in that video, because this video is not about Ryu's feats or any of that stuff. And I'm also not explaining it at all. I'm just giving my brief thoughts. But I hope you see what I mean. Someone who most people think would mid-diff Yuta would get low diffed by 15-Fingered Sukuna. So what do you think 15-Fingered Sukuna would do to Yuta and Rika? So I think that's where most people think he lies. Obviously, I have Yuta going a bit lower than that. And of course, there are the people who think he goes a bit higher than that. So maybe he's actually completely on par with Yorozu. And I know this is going to sound absolutely crazy, and I just want to clarify, I do not believe this, but I have seen actually a lot of people say both Yuta and Rika were physically holding themselves back against Ryu and Uro, and had they wanted to, they actually could have speed blitzed and one-shot both of them. And again, I'm not talking about some curse techniques or curse tools he's hiding. I actually mean physical stats. So Yuta and Rika, and most importantly Rika, was allowing herself to get hit and was nerfing her defense, her output, and her physical speed several times over. And that's why the Ryu and Uro fight was even relative at all. Had he wanted to, he could have just blitzed and one-shot them both. I do not believe these insane takes, but I just want to say this because I get a lot of comments of people really standing beside that. And these comments get a lot of likes as well. If you believe that, hey, that's fair game. What can I do? Now that we've gone where Yuta scales out of the way and why he should get the power up or why he shouldn't, let's finally discuss actual part of the video I really want to talk about. What power-ups are he gonna get? Now I actually have a couple power-ups that I think he could get that I will discuss, but it's actually important to discuss his actual potential as well. I do want you all to realize Yuta is someone who's only been a sorcerer for a year and a half, and it's not just that, it's the fact that he's only even known about this world of Jujutsu and cursed energy for only about like what, 2 years? A year and a half? Well, you're comparing someone who is still a fresh and new sorcerer and a teenager at that, with characters like Ryu, Uro, Yorozu, and Sukuna who have been sorcerers for decades, who have lived through life and death battles and have been training intensely for, again, decades. And Yuta's still somehow in contention. I just want you to realize how much potential this kid has. And you may say that the potential is useless if you can't actually utilize it or if you can't actually train to unlock it. I disagree. We've seen that if you have the potential, that potential can be awakened during high diff fights when it's needed. For example, Megami, when he activated his domain in the middle of a high diff fight, the only reason he was able to get so much stronger during the finger bearer fight in the end of season 1 is because he had that potential. Listen, had that been any other sorcerer who was as strong as Megami at that time and who was a first year student, he wouldn't have pulled out a domain expansion out of the ass. Like, the only reason Megami was able to do that and get so much stronger was again because he has the potential to begin with, and that's actually what allows him to get these power-ups during fights. And it's the same way that Yuji got a massive power. Because he's still a fresh and new sorcerer, there's a lot of untapped potential he hasn't gotten into, and that's what he unlocked in the Sukuna fight. Now, why he unlocked that potential and what it has to do with Kenjaku, we don't actually know, but that's not important to my point. The point being, if you just have the potential at all, it's something that can be awakened during a high diff fight or during an intense moment. And of course, this is something I've broken down in several videos. So just Yuta having this immense untapped potential is honestly the biggest and most obvious reason as to why he can actually get a power. Anyone in this series is going to get a massive power up during a fight. It is the man of the most potential who has not yet tapped into all of it. He's just a kid right now. Okay, so the first power up that I'll get into, and the one that most people don't think he's gonna get, so that's why I'll cover this one first, it's actually him having copied the 6 Eyes and Limitless. As to how he would have done that, again, remember before the Shibuya incident, Gojo actually approached Yuta and told him that something's gonna happen to him. And he actually told Yuta that he needs to take care of the rest of the kids if something happens to him. So it's very easy for, at that time, whatever the conditions are, for Yuta to get those conditions from Gojo. Even if it is blood, it's very easy for Gojo to just cut his hand, give Yuta the blood, and he can just heal himself, or Yuta can heal him. It's easy as that. It's not like they're in the middle of combat, he's his ally too. And as for the 6 Eyes, which is the biggest issue, a lot of people are very confused, and I actually do understand this because of JJK 0. And let me explain. JJK 0 has many, and I just mean many plot holes. There are so many inconsistencies, things that are just blatantly contradicted and then not true in the slightest compared to the current story. In JJK 0, it's mind-boggling. And I do want to clarify, JJK 0 is a great side manga, great movie, and all of these plot holes and inconsistencies are completely understandable because, of course, this series was made a whole year before Jujutsu Kaisen was even made itself. So it's very understandable why it has these. But just to quickly discuss a few. Geto not using a domain expansion would have instantly killed Yuta and he could have taken Rika. Because again, all special grades have domain expansion, so Geto not using his is a bit weird. Remember, Yuta at the JJK 0 time didn't have a simple domain or domain expansion, and the guaranteed hit would spawn on on Yuta himself, Rika wouldn't be able to protect it, it would have just killed him. Another one is Gojo saying Rika would actually be a tough fight, or be very hard for him to beat, or maybe he doesn't even know. And what we get in several data books, the actual story itself, and GEGE's own words in interviews, Gojo cannot be killed and nothing can beat him. And I mean the current Gojo in the current series, not JJK 0. And this also goes into this weaker version of, if he just had Rika, he would have been sure that he could have beat Gojo. We know currently in the actual series, he would have had no chance of beating Gojo. And of course there's other inconsistencies, such as Gojo not instantly blitzing and one-shotting Miguel. And I do understand that the black rope was disrupting his curse technique, and maybe that was affecting his cursed energy control a bit, but how much is it affecting his cursed energy control? Is it taking him from 20-fingered Sukuna level to like 1-fingered Sukuna level? And he can still use his curse technique. I mean, he was using it literally during the fight in JJK 0 in several instances, so it actually wasn't being disrupted at a lot of points. The fact that Miguel not only tanks all these hits, but doesn't get instantly speed blitzed one-shot like Gojo, just before Miguel even knows he's moving, goes behind him, smacks him on the back of his neck and just knocks him out. From this scaling implication, Miguel physically actually scales, at the very least is comparable to 15-fingered Sukuna, or would actually outscale him, and he himself in hand-to-hand combat would actually destroy Ryu, Rika, Hashima, or anyone else. Do you see how crazy that is? And there's a bunch of other stuff, and I'm just gonna stop now. I was just trying to make the point that JJK 0 is very inconsistent, and we should take things that happen in the current story as far more factual and canon compared to what happened in JJK 0. And of course, the reason all of this was brought up, yes, there was a reason, it wasn't all random, is because when Yuta uses Inumaki's technique in Sendai Colony, he actually gets the genetic tattoos that cover the mouth, tongue, and inside the throat. It's very important to note that Inumaki's tattoos are the exact same as Gojo's. It is something you are born with, it is genetic, and it is very unfortunate, but it's something you can't turn off. In the same way Gojo wears the blindfold, he can't turn the 6 eyes off, Inumaki has to speak in this weird language because he just can't turn this technique off. It's genetic, it's there forever, and it can't go away. And as I said, in Sendai, when he uses Inumaki's technique, he gets this genetic tattoos all across his mouth, tongue, and inside of his throat. The reason I brought up JJK 0 is because in JJK 0 he actually doesn't have the tattoo. But of course, as I just explained before, JJK 0 has even bigger inconsistencies and plot holes than that, and what we've got in the actual story is when Yuta used Inumaki's technique, he got the genetic traits of his as well. Now, I'm not confirming he's gonna have the 6 eyes, I'm just saying it's not an impossibility. It is actually an option, and is something that could very well happen. If you still think it's impossible, that's totally fine. I can't confirm it, I'm not the author GEGE himself, I'm just giving points as to why he might be able to. The second power, and this also does go into the big one, which is the third one. The second one is just going to get a massive mental power. As we've seen in JJK and several times over, mental power-ups are so important, and as a matter of fact, they're actually more important than any other type of power-ups, because mental power-ups can translate into massive growth in cursed energy, in technique, and in every aspect of Jujutsu. As we saw with Naoya, his misogyny was just so strong that it allowed him to awaken a domain during Sakurajima Colony. As we saw with Yuji with Power Up He just got. As we saw with Maki, just her switching her mentality made her way stronger. So with Megami in the Finger Bearer, where him switching his mentality, not only did it awaken a domain, but he also got a big boost in curse energy. And I could name 20 other examples, but I don't want to make the point too redundant. If for whatever reason, during the 15-fingered Sukuna fight or the Kenjaku fight, Yuta has a massive switch in mindset, such as when Yuji had it against Sukuna, where his mindset had flipped completely. He went from being a cog to, let's see if you can handle my suffering, right? Just a complete switch. Then yes, he is going to awaken a lot of potential. And the evidence for this is also Uro herself said, because Yuta is so forgiving and he doesn't trample on others, and he doesn't care about himself the most, which is something I love about his character, by the way, but because of that, he actually can't ascend to greater heights such as Sukuna and Gojo. So it's very possible. Just one switch in mindset, you will get a massive mental power, a great surge of cursed energy. And I do want to say this might actually go into the third point. It's if Rika goes away and Yuta can finally unlock his true potential. And I know some of you may be confused. What do you mean? Doesn't Rika make Yuta a lot stronger? Isn't the only reason Yuta is so strong because of Rika? Well, no. But maybe a bit yes, but still no. So I did explain this in one of my oldest videos. It must have been 6 or 7 months ago, where I made a big breakdown about this. But pretty much this long time theory of mine, when he accidentally created Rika, we see it's confirmed by Gojo and Yuta himself. All of the cursed energy of Rika and all of the power actually comes from Yuta himself. That's why Rika is so strong. So obviously, in order to create a Shikigami this strong, you have to sacrifice, you have to give a lot. So the way I always see it is that Yuta actually gave a lot of his innate cursed energy, which is crazy since he already has the most, but he gave a lot of that and a lot of his actual power to create Rika. He did this completely on accident, so it's not like it's his fault or he messed up badly. It was just an accident. He didn't mean to do it when he was a kid, but unfortunately, consequences of him doing that is actually, he's basically split his power between him him and Rika, and maybe actually even giving more to Rika, since Rika is so much stronger than him. So the theory goes, if Rika dies or goes away, at least the Shikigami part, all of that power that Rika had or he'd given Rika would all go to him, and Yuta would just finally be a stacked and overpowered sorcerer, where he would basically have all of his cursed energy and power with Rika's. It would be absolutely crazy. Of course, he wouldn't have the infinite funnel, but it would be a lot better to have just a gargantuan amount in base rather than only having it for 5 minutes. Because again, if Rika goes and he has all that power in base, that 5 limit time limit, yeah, it's gone. Finally loses his biggest weakness, which is massive weakness. It's so glaring. The one thing I've seen is people say, doesn't he need Rika as a storage? And you're completely right. He needs Rika not just for the curse tools. I don't think it's that important, the curse tools, but most importantly, storage of all the information of curse techniques, so it doesn't overload Yuta's brain. As it was said by Yuki, the proper way to do this is to do something like what Yuki did. Make a Shikigami that's obviously strong, but it's not that overpowered, and you're not giving all of your strength and power into it. If Yuta makes another Shikigami, after he gets all of his potential, he could transfer all of the information that Rika has, all of the future information that he gets of curse techniques, into this weaker Shikigami. And it's still not going to be weak. It'd probably be good Yuta level. But at the very least, because the Shikigami isn't as strong as Rika, it wouldn't have that 5 limit time limit. So again, he would have all of the cursed energy, obviously not an infinite amount, but he'd have a lot of Rikas into his own base. He'd be way stronger physically. And he also wouldn't have the time limit because the Shikigami isn't so powerful. So like good Yuta, he can just keep it out all the time. It's just crazy. Because then we could see Yuta, no time limit, be way stronger and use his curse technique, spamming it like crazy, but he just doesn't have Rika. How he would get this is maybe when he's fighting Kenjaku and Sukuna, Yuta runs out in the 5 minutes, but she tries to force herself to stay out, and maybe that's what happens and she goes away, or maybe she herself chooses to go away after the 5 minutes or sacrifice herself to give Yuta the cursed energy. These are just completely headcanon random points. I'm just trying to make the actual point that there is a lot of ways you can write this and even make it a cool emotional part as well, however you think it will happen. But hey, if Yuta decides to get the power up and Kenjaku uses his domain expansion and uses his body swapping curse technique as the sure hit and takes Yuta's body as the sure hit, then hey, I guess Kenjaku would be stacked as well. Maybe he'd get Rika or something. Yeah, now I'm just trolling a bit. But hey, if you watched this far and you enjoyed the video and you're a fan of JJK, I would recommend subscribing to the channel. There is a ton of JJK content just like this, versus battles, power scaling, what ifs, and live streams too, like live reactions and discussions and such. So do consider subscribing. And of course, if you did enjoy the video, be sure to leave a like too. It does help out the video a lot. So thank you if you did. And of course, thank you to all of the channel members. You can see all your names on the screen. And a big extra thank you to the Worst Box as well for gifting a lot of these memberships. Thank you to everyone whose name's on the screen. Thank you very, very much. But that's all. Have a great day and take care. Goodbye.